Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ according to Matthew for the 26th Sunday of Ordinary Time. Jesus said to the chief priests and elders of the people, "What is your opinion? A man had 2 sons. He came to the first and said, 'Son, go out and work in the vineyard today.' He said in reply, 'I will not,' but afterwards changed his mind and went. The man came to the other son and gave the same order. He said in reply, 'Yes, sir,' but did not go. Which of the 2 did his father's will?" They answered, "The first." Jesus said to them, "I tell you truly, tax collectors and prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God before you. When John came to you in the way of righteousness, you did not believe him, but tax collectors and prostitutes did. Yet even when you saw that, you did not later change your minds and believe him." The Gospel of the Lord. When Catherine Drexel was only in her 20s, she was one of the wealthiest and most influential women of her time. Born in Philadelphia right after the Civil War, Katie Drexel was the daughter of a wealthy international banker. In fact, the family firm grew into the Wall Street powerhouse known today as Drexel Burnham Lambert. But her parents also taught her how to be generous and compassionate with wealth. Katie learned that money is to be shared with others. A turning point in Katie's life was a family vacation to the western United States. She saw Native Americans mistreated and living in extreme poverty. She witnessed the plight of African Americans living in unimaginable squalor, dehumanized by the brutality of institutionalized racism. This led her to become a major benefactor of the missions in the American South and West. But her greatest gift was herself. In 1887, Catherine had the opportunity to meet Pope Leo XIII. In their conversation, she told the Pope of her concern for the Indian and Negro communities and asked if he could recommend a religious order who worked with these overlooked minorities that she could support. Impressed by her passion for the cause, the Pope responded, "Why don't you become a missionary yourself?" The Pope's challenge was all she needed to hear. In 1889, at the age of 30, the heiress of the Drexel fortune entered the Sisters of Mercy. 2 years later, she founded her own religious community, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. Beside the usual vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, Mother Catherine and her sisters took a 4th vow, quote, "to be the mother and servant of the Indian and Negro races." Mother Catherine Drexel used the income from her father's trust, $350,000 a year, a huge amount of money in the early 1900s, to build over 100 schools in the rural West and South, including Xavier University in New Orleans, the only historically Black Catholic college in the United States. She also fought for civil rights, taking on the Ku Klux Klan and funding some of the NAACP's investigations into the exploitation of Black workers. At the time of her death in 1955, it is estimated that Mother Catherine Drexel had given more than $21 million to help found churches, schools, and hospitals across the United States. Today, she is a candidate for sainthood. Blessed Catherine Drexel is a woman who put her money and her life where her heart was. Catherine Drexel's life reflects the two lessons of today's gospel: the primacy of deeds over words, and the holiness that resides within every person as a child of God. Jesus is quite clear. Promises can never take the place of performance. Words can never be a substitute for deeds. Jesus demands that we who would be his disciples give voice to our faith, not just in the prayers and rituals we speak, but in the good we do and support, the positions and candidates we uphold, and the relationships we form with one another. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus also warns us not to be too quick to gauge people according to our own, and often dubious, standards. He calls us to look beyond labels and stereotypes such as tax collectors and prostitutes, and recognize instead that every person is, like us, a child of God. This might give you a hint how serious Jesus was in this confrontation with the religious leaders. Prostitutes and tax collectors were the most despised outcasts in Judaism. In line with the Old Testament's tradition of seeing God's relationship with Israel as a marriage and Israel's disloyalty as the behavior of a prostitute, that was considered an especially heinous sin. And as for tax collectors, in the eyes of Palestinian Jews, they were the very personification of corruption and theft. Furthermore, as agents of the state, they were shunned as collaborators with Israel's Roman occupiers. That might help you understand why Jesus' reaching out to tax collectors, such as Zacchaeus and Matthew, was considered so scandalous. Jesus' simple story of the two sons takes the gospel out of the realm of the theoretical and places the mercy of God into the midst of our messy, complicated, everyday lives. Compassion, forgiveness, and mercy are only words until our actions give full expression of those values in our relationship with others. Our calling ourselves Christians and disciples of Jesus doesn't mean anything until our lives express that identity in the values we uphold and the beliefs we live. Discipleship requires us to embrace the gospel not as a set of idealistic assumptions or abstract concepts, but as the rule by which we struggle to live our imperfect lives. Two sons were asked to work in their father's vineyard. One said he would do so, but did not. The other said he would not, but he did. It was this second son who did what the Father wanted. God, our Father, asks us all to work in the vineyard, preparing the world for the coming of the fullness of God's kingdom. Some of us talk about the work that needs to be done, calling attention to the social ills that divide us, the poverty and hunger, the discrimination and oppression, the militarism and war. Others of us do something about these problems, challenging the systems that produce poverty and hunger, struggling to overcome discrimination and oppression, agitating for peace and an end to militarism. The challenge of Jesus is to look to others' interests rather than only to one's own. It is to look beyond one's small world, which may be filled with satisfaction and fulfillment, and look out into that world where people suffer and die. And it is to go beyond talk and, in some way, become involved in action for the transformation of the world. Two sons were asked to work in their father's vineyard. One of them did what the father wanted. Thanks for listening.